Hey everybody, welcome to Right On, the podcast from Final Draft. This is the show where we talk about all things screenwriting. Today we have an interview with Courtney Kang, creator and showrunner of the Disney Plus series Doogie Kameāloha.
Somebody help! Out of the way! You two, keep everyone back. I'm here to help you. This looks like a tension pneumothorax. I need to borrow this. Sorry.
You saved him. Who is this kid?
My daughter, the doctor.
Earlier today, a man's life was saved by a local teen doctor.
Dr. Kameāloha will be taking care of you.
Aloha, Mr. Lim.
Is this some kind of practical joke?
You know who she's like? Remember Doogie Howser? That show from the 90s? She's like a real-life Doogie Howser. That's why we call her Doogie.
I never made the connection.
Girl, why did you think we called her Doogie?
Being a 16-year-old doctor is kind of like having a superpower.
Doctor, may I have a word with you? I think we got a little something
Ew,
right now.
Mom, gross.
Well, are you hungry? I love you, doctor.
Host Sharday Sellers and Courtney discussed how she pitched the Doogie Howser reboot to Disney, the importance of cultural accuracy on the show, her work on shows like Fresh Off the Boat and How I Met Your Mother, and more. Check it out.
Hey everyone, this is Sharday. Welcome back to another episode of Right On. I am here with showrunner Courtney Kang for the new Disney Plus series, Doogie Kameāloha, MD. Hi, Courtney.
Hi, how are you?
Good. First of all, where in the world are you?
I am in Los Angeles.
Okay, I was gonna say the show takes place on Oahu.
Yes.
And is that where you're originally from? Because I read somewhere it was inspired by your childhood.
Yes, I was born in Hawaii and then I grew up outside of Philadelphia, but I would always go back and visit my grandma and my aunties and uncles there. And my dad is from Hawaii. His ancestors were on the first boat from Korea to Hawaii back in 1903, and they came to work in the sugar plantations. And so my dad is third generation. And so like my grandma doesn't even speak Korean. Like they've been there for so long. And so, yeah, I always wanted to do a show set there.
I recently came back from Kauai, shooting a horror movie there.
Oh, wow.
First of all, that island's very beautiful, but Oahu I've been to before. Gorgeous. The Hawaiian people in general are just so kind. I think they taught me the aloha way, which is just you let everyone go first, which is very difficult for an LA person,
Yes.
How do you spend your time throughout the year? The show shoots there, right? Are you there now half the time and then back in LA here?
It was a real challenge this season because of COVID. And so, I'm a mom, I have 3 girls. And when the show started, I went to Hawaii to shoot the pilot. And my plan was I was going to shoot the pilot and then come home and edit and then go back out for like the first 2 episodes. And then COVID cases like jumped up. The pilot took longer to shoot. We had some, because things take time. And so what ended up happening was I ended up going out there. I was there for like 2.5 months to start off with, to sort of kick off the show. And it was really difficult to be away from my family for so long because this was during the time when like there wasn't vaccinations. And if you travel, you should quarantine for 2, like, it wasn't like, now I would go and fly back for a weekend and that just wasn't an option. And so it was really tricky to sort of navigate all of that. So I was there in the beginning. And then at the end, I came back out and it was great because I was vaccinated. I went out for like 3 weeks and was able to be there. It's interesting. This was the first time that I've done this in that the script got picked up to series based on the script. So as the room started, as we were casting, and so we were breaking all of the episodes and writing it. And by the time we were fully cast, we had 5 scripts written. And then I left for Hawaii to shoot the pilot. It was like a bit of a moving freight train. Like in the olden days, you would shoot a pilot, hire a writing staff, talk about like what the season's going to be. You might make some changes to the pilot. Like it sort of is like orderly in how you do things. But we were like shot out of a cannon let's go. We're doing 10 of these, go, 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 which was great, but it presented some challenges.
That is amazing, especially because when I was on Kauai, everything moves a little bit slower there, a lot slower, I would say. So in terms of production, did you feel the difference? You're from there, obviously, so maybe it wasn't that big of a difference, but how did COVID really affect at least your production role?
It affects it a lot. It was, first of all, the masks and talking to actors about performances with masks and shields is intense. We also, the challenge of this show is it stars Peyton Elizabeth Lee, who is 16. And so her hours are limited. And, she's in a lot of the scenes. And so that on top of the COVID protocols and all of those things, the Hawaii weather is a challenge. It'll be gorgeous.
Yes.
It'll rain for a few minutes. We get everybody touched up. We're all ready to go. Then it drizzles again. You know how it is. And so it does present its challenges for sure.
This may seem cliche, but I love when I watch shows like yours and I'm like, well, the state or the city or the culture is like a character on the show. How important was it to make sure you reflected the beauty of Hawaii, but also how important it is to preserve that as well within the show?
It was really important. We, on the one hand, when we decided to go to Hawaii to shoot the show, we also wanted to, if we're going to go all that way, let's see it on the screen. And so we would really look at the scripts and think how can we maximize the Hawaii of it all? We had an episode recently where Lahela meets her boyfriend, Walter's lackluster friends, so to speak. And we had written it that they're in a basement playing video games. Well, first off, in Hawaii, there's not really basements. That's a very East Coast thing, but that was I went to high school in Pennsylvania and that's what kids did. And so then it became, well, we're in Hawaii. How do we maximize on the Hawaii of it all? And so we set it as a skate park. So now we're in this beautiful skate park. There's a mountain behind it. It's much more visual. It's much more interesting scene. And so, it would be about little things like that, squeezing out as much Hawaii as we could into every single episode.
And in your opinion, as someone whose family is rooted there as well, what do you think productions, especially ones from LA coming to the islands, can do better in terms of building a bond between the culture and the community?
I think the big thing that they can do is hire their department heads locally, because there's a real tendency to bring department heads from the mainland there and, then fill up the crew with local folks. And one of the nice things about our show, and I think what's great about having more shows with different folks running them and different folks at the center of them, is it gives you a reason as to why it shouldn't just be all white people in charge. It makes sense that, for example, our wardrobe department is 2 local folks who had worked for a long time on other shows in the wardrobe department, but they had never been department heads. This was their first time doing it. And one of the great things that they brought to the show is Lahela's Scrubs has a little aloha pattern. There's a little pineapple floral print on her scrubs. And that was their idea. They were like, oh, this is what the local girls do to dress up their scrubs. And they gave her, she has these cute rainbow and pineapple pins that they dressed up her medical coat with. And they were like, this is how the local girls would dress up their scrubs. And it felt very real to what a 16-year-old girl doctor in Hawaii would do. And so I think that's a great example of it makes sense for us to find department heads who were local, who knew what was really going on there. And so I think that's one thing that, productions can do in really to make Hawaii be more than a postcard. I just told the story about the skate park and, we have this beautiful backdrop, which is great. That's one great thing about shooting in Hawaii. But there's also another opportunity to learn more about the actual people who are there and their families and what it's really like. And so by having stories like that, it makes sense to have crew that can support those stories and that can bring them to life. And so it's important to have more folks of color and diversity in front of the camera. But where I think you can really make a difference is the folks behind the camera, the people in charge, the people who are making the show, who get it. And then also at like the studios and networks, having people who make the decisions and write the checks go, oh yeah, this is great. This is like my experience. So then creators aren't tasked with trying to make them see why this story is relatable to everyone, you know?
Which is so great that you said that, because I'm from Michigan. I'm not from Hawaii, but when I spent 2 months there, even watching your pilot episode and her dad has this snow cone truck, I was like, wait, this is something I experienced when I went with my friends who are natives. They took me to get my first like ice.
Shave ice. Yeah.
Shaved ice. That was something that I never had done before. And then I saw it on your show and I felt comforted. I was like, oh wait, I know this. I relate to this. And I have a good experience. So we were also very lucky to have a lot of our department heads be natives and locals. I want to go back to the beginning because you said that this show sold off the script. What is the secret? Tell us what is the secret? Because this is, if you didn't know, listeners, this is based off obviously Doogie Howser from years ago with
Neil Patrick Harris.
Neil Patrick Harris. Thank you. Never saw the show, but of course I know it because of Neil Patrick Harris. So what was it like pitching a show for 2021 with a young woman and a young woman of color set in Hawaii?
Well, what helped is folks were excited about rebooting Doogie Howser. And I think in this day and age, folks get excited about IP. They just do, something solid that everybody can believe in. And so then what I was then tasked with is, how do you make this a story? How do you make this reboot, so to speak, worth doing? And then what's my special sauce that I can put into it? What's the story I want to tell that makes this a story worth telling for me, because or else what are we doing? And so, in thinking about it, I got really excited about the idea that it is a show that takes place in our world, that like Doogie Howser is a real show from the 90s. And it's just this nickname she has. And she's like, I don't even like that show. Like, I wasn't even born. Like, that has nothing to do with me. I feel like sometimes reboots are saddled with the responsibility of filling in like the last 25 years. Like, here's what happened. And then this person moved, but now we couldn't get them. So here's this new person that's going to fill that role. You know what I mean? Like, it's
or
just
the daughter of, and you're like, okay.
Yes. Like, there's all these sort of complicated things. And I like that, in this way of doing it, we sort of freed ourselves from all of that. And it was just a nickname for her. And so I think having that IP helped, and then I had my take on it. I think in this day and age, to get stuff made, back in the day, I feel like I used to go in, have an idea, sell it, I'd write a script. Sometimes they shoot the pilot, sometimes they didn't. And you sort of moved through it all with more ease. There was more trust in the writer and the idea. And now I think folks like things to be undeniable, as they say. Yeah. And the way I see it is they want insurance, and so in this situation, they had the IP of the Doogie Howser show. My producing partners, Jake Kasdan and Melvin Marr, have done, they did Fresh Off the Boat that with me when I worked on that as well. So that's how I got to know those guys, but they've done Fresh Off the Boat. They've done New Girl. Jake directed Jumanji. Jake directed this pilot. So they had him, there was my take on it. And so you sort of need all these factors to make people feel comfortable about writing a big check to let you go to Hawaii and make 10 of these.
I'm so glad you said that, because it's such a truthful and honest answer that a lot of writers don't like to hear, but it is right that you need those incorporated pieces to pad this wonderful script at the same time, but just for, like you said, insurance. It's not whether your script's good or not. It's just more, it makes everyone feel comfortable. Can we talk about your writer's room? I want to know, how did you select your room? What kind of samples did you read to pad your story artist?
I love a writer's room. It's like, I think it's one of the most sacred, wonderful places ever. I was very lucky in that there's a gentleman named Matt Kuhn, who, when I started at How I Met Your Mother, he was a writer's assistant and I was a story editor. And we became buddies, and he eventually got promoted to writer at How I Met Your Mother. And so we worked together for 9 years at How I Met Your Mother. And then when Fresh Off the Boat happened, I went over there, and Nanashka Khan, who created that show, I was going to go over there and be her number 2. And I said to her, you have to hire Matt Kuhn. Like, trust me, he's great. She hired Matt, and I ended up leaving to do other feature stuff and develop. And Matt ended up like running the show the last season. He's wonderful. And so I knew I was going to have Matt come aboard. And then it was reading samples. I read a lot of like original samples and met with folks, and it was all over Zoom. Our whole writer's room was on Zoom, which was a challenge. And we found great people. One thing that I pride myself on that I think I'm really good at is not being precious and making sure that the writers feel like anything they say in the room could end up on TV. Because if writers feel like that's not the case, you lose them. It's like, what's the point? Like, what am I gonna do?
Any employee could feel like that.
Yes, exactly. And I think that we had a really safe room. We had a really funny room. And it also, you know, given that it was a pandemic, I'm a mom, I have 3 kids, like the kids were like home Zooming. My husband's also a writer. He works on American Dad. And so our bedroom has my office like off to the one side and his office off to the other side. And so in any given day, our 2 rooms there would be like 2 writers' rooms going in our house on the Zoom, you know?
Between the 2 of you, you single-handedly are covering TV, you know, for your kids and for us.
And like our kids are like running back and forth between the rooms, and it's chaos. But I looked at their samples and meeting people, and I call people who know the person and, you know, do it that way. It's really challenging to build a staff and to get staffed. Like every time I build a staff, I'm shocked that I ever got staffed ever, because it's such a minuscule thing of what you're looking for, you know? And so it's a lot of luck, honestly. And in any given pile of scripts, the bulk of them are great. They just are. You know, and there's this percentage that you're like, that's amazing. And it's also subjective. You might be that this is amazing in one person's pile, and that's a great script in somebody else's pile. And so it's luck.
Oh, and that's another great answer, because I was just talking to a friend today that most of my, at least in my experience, most of my, resume has been due to luck. And it could be anyone else in this position. I just happen to be here. I think that's something sobering that a lot of new writers need to know and understand, that that's out of your control, but at least your written work is in your control. Like you have control of that.
Yes. And I want to clarify the luck thing too, because I do think that once you're at a certain level, like you have to work hard at your craft, you have to have really good samples, you have to do well in the room, you have to do all of these things, be in the right place at the right time. And then there's a little bit of it that's left up to chance.
Yeah.
But I don't want to take all of the agency out of it, because I'm sure you're an amazing writer who deserves all of these opportunities. And so there is an element of luck to it, but there's a sort of starting place of like the hours and hours that you put in to just get to that point.
Exactly. It's like Charlize Theron is a wonderful actress who happened to be discovered in like a convenience store. How lucky, you know?
Right. But chances are, if she wasn't discovered at that convenience store, she would have like gone to a mall and somebody would have picked her up there.
Like she was going to make it no matter what.
Yeah. It's always a mall. I feel like it's like I was at the mall with my mom and a talent agent. Yeah, I guess not.
No, it definitely would be TikTok, which by the way, that High School Musical joke in the pilot and the TikTok was so funny.
Oh, good. I'm so glad you enjoyed it. It was based on a real thing. I have a 13-year-old daughter, and she had a TikTok, the TikTok dance to like Renegade. And she invited me to be in it. And I was so excited to be in the TikTok video that, as my husband says, it's like the most embarrassing thing he's ever seen, because like she's dancing and is like all cool. And I'm like I couldn't be happier to be there.
Be here. Just happy to be here.
So happy. And he was like, oh babe, it's such a bummer. It hurts so hard to watch it.
Especially in that moment you realize, wow, I'm old enough to not be cool anymore. This hurts.
Totally.
I want to ask before we wrap up, it's a question we ask all of our guests in the show, but what advice do you have for your younger writer self? Which, by the way, I also want to mention, I didn't know that you worked on How I Met Your Mother. So this whole connection back to Doogie Howser is really cool, by the way. It's really full circle. Yeah.
The thing that I wish I had learned sooner is it doesn't matter what other people think, and using external markers to decide if you're a good writer or if you're good at this, or like if you're going to make it. But the sooner you get comfortable with you knowing what it is and you knowing the truth, you will do so much better in just sort of taking ownership of that. Like, I feel like there was so often that, there'd be pilots that didn't go, or, jobs I didn't get, that I would be so bummed and devastated. And like, I don't know if I can do this and all of those things. And when you realize that, like, it's a marathon, it's such a marathon. I've been doing this almost 20 years now. And so like, I've learned so much, and all of those little stumbles along the way, I learned a little something, and so it didn't work out this time, but you take that and you go on to the next thing. I write a bunch of features. And when I started, I never got anything. I would go out on these cattle calls and like work for break out whole movies. And now looking back, I see they were never going to hire me. Like, they were out to fancier writers and waiting to see if they would say yes. And they were never like, unless I came in there and like somehow blew them away. But like, chances are I wasn't ever going to blow them away. But all that pitching that I was always like, this is for nothing. This is for nothing. You know what it did? It made me really good at pitching. Like, I pitched to everybody. I pitched everything. I pitched movie after movie that nobody ever bought from me. And I would be devastated, but it all led me to the moment that I needed to be in. And so you just sort of have to have faith in it's a marathon, and let go of using those markers to decide what that means about you or your career. Just like throw that bullshit out.
I love that. I feel like I needed to hear that the most today.
Good.
I love that, because hindsight is such 2020. And I look at the girl who moved here in 2009 and go, if you would have thought you'd been here today, you would be flabbergasted. This was not the plan, but here you are. So I think we could all use a little grace and faith, like you said, that the marathon works, and it is a little slow, but it does work. Courtney, we're gearing up for the season finale of the show. How are you feeling? Like, the audience, by the way, on Twitter loves this show. I went through the hashtag and I was like, this has a base, and they are so excited for the season finale.
Yes, I love that. One of the things that's been oddly surprising to me is I've never worked on something that like my kids actively watch. Like, I think sometimes like family entertainment is sort of like, I don't know, not maybe looked down upon, or, everybody's trying to do the edgy R-rated comedy, myself included in that sometimes.
Right.
Working on this show, my family, I have 3 girls, and we all watch it every week. And it has been so fun to watch the show with them. And like, they tell their friends about it. Like,
they're
like I took them to like this little art class, and I have a daughter who's in like, 2nd grade. And she said to the art teacher, like, do you watch Doogie Kameāloha? And the lady was like, no. And she's like, my mom created it. So.
That's the best compliment, where they're so proud of you. You're like, humility, honey. Tell them to watch it.
It was really sweet. And the woman had no idea what she was talking about, but it didn't stop her. She's like, it's my mom. The lady was like, all right. Anyway, here's how you do paper mache. But it was great.
I love that. And I didn't realize it when I was watching the show, but I'm realizing it now as we're talking, because growing up, there was no woman of color in a role like this on TV. I think they're so spoiled now, the generation behind me, that this is a normal for them. But had the show came out when I was their age, it would have been special to me as well. Because and first of all, that young actress is so talented. Just literally the first 5 seconds of the show, you're like, oh, she's got something. And she's engaging and she commands your attention. And then see her perform as a doctor and all these adults, you're just like, this is special. This is something I'm glad is not a big deal now, but it is a big deal. I grew up and that wasn't a thing. That was not ever going to be a thing. And now it is. How lucky.
Yes, it's really exciting. And Peyton, who plays Lahela, is just, I cannot say enough good things about her. We laugh sometimes that we a little bit write her like a superhero. Like the show opens.
Yes, I love it.
Like, she's like surfing, then she's like saving somebody on the beach, and then she has like a romance with Walter. And so it's and Peyton is such an amazing actress that you buy her in all those different parts. Like you buy her as an awkward teenager, and you buy her as like a doctor who knows what's up. She's been a real joy to get to know.
No, that opening pilot scene where she's telling the officers, you're going to get in trouble if you don't help me with this. I was just like, you tell him, girl. I loved it so much. And I just think it's an amazing thing that you guys have put together. And I'm so proud of it. And your kids are proud of it. I hope you are. I can't wait for the season finale and for season 2.
Yes.
Yeah, season 2. So Courtney, thank you so much for coming on the show today. Everyone, Doogie Kame'aloha is currently streaming on Disney Plus, and the season finale should be right around the time this episode drops. So please check it out. Courtney, thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks again to Courtney Kang, and as always to Sharday Sellers. Doogie Kame'aloha is streaming right now on Disney Plus. And as always, thanks to you, our listeners. If you liked this episode, leave us a review, and if you haven't already, subscribe to the show on Apple, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcasts. For news about new episodes and more, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter at Final Draft Inc., and on Instagram at Final Draft Screenwriting. This podcast was produced by Kayla Guess and co-produced by Emma Vranich. Editing is by Sean Bonnet. Music is by T. Kelly. Thanks again, everyone. Until next time, right on.